Well, hello and thank you for joining me for another Alex on Tech and iTWIre video. I'm joined today by Deepen Desai. He is the CISO and the VP of Security Research and Operations at Zscaler. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Alex, for having me.
Now, I know that it's called CISO, but anyway, CISO. So look, Zscaler says that it can help you break free from the cost of owning and maintaining security point products. And your description on Google says, see how Zscaler closes security gaps and moves enterprises to the cloud. So can you please tell us how Zscaler does that, or Zscaler as you probably say, and what else you offer to your customers in 2020?
Right. So Zscaler has built a cloud-native proxy-based architecture. It's a cloud security platform that resides in 150 data centers around the world. So the core message over here is, regardless of where your users are, whether they are traveling, whether they're in the office, or in the current time frame, working from home, the security stack is close to your user, right? And it's in the cloud. Your users will always go through the closest Zscaler data center before they're allowed to browse any destinations on the internet. So that's basically how there is no need on the organization side to worry about shipping those appliances, increasing capacity, because all of those are transparent. And we are able to elastically scale the compute resources that are needed.
So do end user computers still require some sort of internet security software or endpoint protection, or does Zscaler mitigate that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So you do need a client connector app, which runs on your user's laptop. So as soon as the user boots up the machine, it will connect to the closest Zscaler data center before the user is allowed to browse any internet-bound destinations.
And presumably that endpoint protection client of yours does all the usual things: anti-ransomware, anti-malware, URL filtering, all the usual things you would expect, but it's doing it through the power of the cloud.
Yes, so it basically routes all your traffic through Zscaler Cloud.
Yep.
All the scanning activity, sandboxing, all of that happens in the cloud environment. And we are able to learn from millions of users that are going through Zscaler Cloud and apply that intelligence across the ecosystem.
Now, early this month, you released the 2020 State of Encrypted Attacks report from your Threat Labs team. And I'll have a link to where people can download that and read the report in more detail. But what is the state of encrypted attacks this year? What are the most impacted industries, and how large have these threats grown in 2020?
Right. So that was a fascinating study that we did. What we did in that were we compiled all the stats on uh, encrypted attacks that were observed in the Zscaler cloud ecosystem from January to September timeframe. And what we found was, expectedly, with the post-COVID threat landscape, we've seen a general trend in increase in attacks. But what was interesting was about 200%, actually 260% increase in encrypted attacks were observed in 2020 compared to the same time frame last year. And that accounted for about 6.6 billion threats that were blocked inside encrypted channels.
Now, some people might think that, because you talk about SSL-based threats, and some people might imagine that the bad guys are somehow breaking into encryption. And of course, this encryption is used by banks and everybody to protect our traffic. But really, it's about the bad guys hiding threats within encrypted SSL traffic. So, what can you explain just in a nutshell, better than I just did, what these SSL-based threats are and how hackers are using this encrypted traffic to carry out their nefarious activities?
Right. You actually did a fairly good job, but I'll tell you what all areas are we seeing this,
Sure.
right? So yes, the general notion is whenever a user sees a green padlock sign in their browser, hey, it's secure. The obvious thing is, yes, all the content that is flowing between the source and the destination is encrypted, so nobody can snoop in what's flowing through. But that also provides a perfect hidden channel for the bad guys who are trying to serve a malicious payload to the end user, or if they're trying to exfiltrate data from the end user to an internet bound destination. So what we saw as part of our study was the bad guys were leveraging encrypted channels across the entire attack chain or kill chain, starting with phishing campaigns
Mm-hmm.
where the goal is to steal employee credentials. There were a lot of exploit kit activity that we saw. We also saw many malware payloads being hosted on legitimate cloud storage service providers like Dropbox, OneDrive, Google, AWS. And the intent over there was pretty clear. They were trying to take advantage of the cloud storage provider's reputation
Mm-hmm.
in order to trick the user into clicking the link and downloading the content
Mm.
and hoping that the organization to which that user belongs to is not performing SSL inspection.
So, what were the other key findings of the report? I mean, it's a detailed report, so there's a lot for people to go through. But in a nutshell, what were some of the other things that people really need to know?
Right. So there were a couple other key findings. One was, I mean, there was a lot of chatter early on during the pandemic that cyber criminals will spare healthcare industry,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's one of the critical industry in helping the humankind around the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
In order to recover from the pandemic. But what we saw was healthcare was the number one industry vertical as far as our cloud data is concerned, with 25% of all advanced threats that were delivered over encrypted channel was actually targeting healthcare.
So much
So
for
that
honor
was
among thieves. I mean, it obviously wasn't there.
there is no order of things.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Mm.
Yes. So that was interesting. The other piece was we did notice a significant increase, 500% increase in ransomware payloads being
Mm.
delivered over encrypted channel as well. So that does align with a lot of the ransomware attacks that are out there that are being talked about in the news cycle as well.
Mm.
The attackers are clearly leveraging encrypted channel to serve those payloads to the end user.
And only because it's topical right now, but I mean, have you seen scams around the uncertainty over the US election appearing as well?
Absolutely, yes. We did see some fake sites being spun up. In some cases, it was purely scam with misinformation. In other cases, there were intent to download a malicious payload on the end user system as well.
I'm imagining some of these people probably tried to solicit donations and pocket the money themselves rather than pass it on to the respective campaigns.
That actually was quite prevalent for COVID related team.
Mm.
We did see quite a bit of scam activity around that, where people were spinning up, bad guys were spinning up site to kind of scam the end user. At times, even scam government in taking away the relief effort that was happening for the enterprises as well as end users.
Now, as we get towards the end of the interview, I always like to talk about the future, some great advice you've received in life, and your final message. So let's start with the future. I always like to look towards 2030 because it's a very handy, 10-year time frame. And over this time frame, I mean, we hear a lot about passwordless, and I've seen there's certain ATM machines where you can now take your bank card and tap it, and you don't have to type in a code anymore. So we're starting to see some sort of passwordless things happen. But when do you think we'll truly be passwordless? And then also, we might have internet connected brains by 2030, the rate we're going with technology. So, will it be somehow possible for the bad guys to try and encrypt wetware, encrypt your brain? I mean, then you'll be in some sort of vegetable in a coma, and you got to think about these things because if I can think of it, the bad guys can too. So, what are your thoughts?
Well, ransomwares have evolved quite a bit in past few years. What you're claiming now is a human ransomware attack where they're encrypted. That's quite scary.
Yeah, it is.
But to go back to your question about what will change in the next decade or so, I feel like this was a stepping stone in terms of a year that significantly increased the pace at which enterprises are going through digital transformation.
Mm.
A lot of companies realized with 100% of the workforce going remote, forced to go remote,
Mm.
they were not able to handle the workload with everyone trying to VPN back into their corporate network. So
Absolutely.
that old way of doing security as well as app access is no longer going to be effective with majority of the workforce remote. So people have started moving things to public cloud infrastructure. They are trying to move to a cloud-based security model as well in order to enforce consistent security policies across all the user base. For those that are falling behind, what is going to be scary in the next few years is once we are out of this pandemic and all those machines that are right now in relatively insecure home environment, once they go back to the corporate offices, if one of those machines are infected and if this machine has a physical presence inside the network, it can result in large scale compromise of those networks. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start hearing multiple breach stories sometime next year. And the question about the password going away, I feel multi-factor authentication is a must, even today, right? If you're relying just on a pair of user passwords, then you're doing it wrong,
It's definitely
right?
not enough.
Because yeah, it's fairly trivial for a bad guy to steal or fool your users and then take access of the accounts. So multi-factor authentications, we will see more and more evolution along those lines in the coming years in order to make authentication more secure.
And then I always just like to sort of change gears a little bit and just see if there's any great advice that you've received in life that has helped you in business and life.
Good question. In general sense, I would say you should have strong belief in what you're trying to implement, right? I'm gonna answer this question from the perspective of security because that's the field I deal in. You
Please.
need to believe in the solution. What I've noticed over the years is a lot of the large enterprise executives are just doing certain things because it's how things have been done in past 20 years or past 30 years, right? That's basically the reason why this legacy network architecture has survived for so long. Why? Because hey, that's how it has been done. But now we're seeing so many gaps that exist because of routing traffic back to the corporate network just to scan it, and that user is trying to browse internet-bound destination. That is totally illogical, right? So, having trust and conviction in a technology that you're trying to adopt is very, very important. You shouldn't be doing things just because someone else has done that for past decades. So that's one point I'll tell my users.
Sure. And also, I mean, that also includes reaching out to the company in question, like Zscaler, and saying, hey, help us with this, or, how do we do this? Or, you got to work with the people to trust the technology. You got to trust the company, and they should be open to you being as inquisitive and as possible. And, some people buy the technology and then they don't implement all of the features, and then they wonder why something didn't work or why they still got attacked. So it's important to know what it is you're getting and to use it fully. I mean, they'd always talk about how people with Microsoft Word only use 20% of the features, but everyone uses a different 20%. Well, that shouldn't be the case with security software. We should be using all the features because they were designed for a reason. And, you must see misconfigurations and other things. You must have to reach out to people and say, hey, let us help you, right?
Absolutely. And yeah, we are here to help. Most of our successful customers, like you said, will turn on all the preventive security controls that exist in the stack. There is no reason why you shouldn't be using certain security controls. It's only going to increase your security posture. So, and again, we have a world-class team to help out our customers in order to make sure that they're properly configured.
Sure. I mean, I know that sometimes with consumer software or consumer, internet security software, people turn something off because it allows something to work. But turning that thing off defeats the purpose of having security. So, yeah, if you're having to find a workaround, get in touch with the company and make sure you don't need the workaround. So, Deepen, what is your final message to iTWIre viewers and readers, and to your current and future customers and partners?
Yeah, I think I'll repeat one of the messages that I already conveyed. As we are heading towards next year, as things start getting better and your user starts returning to physical environment. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that does happen.
Yeah.
You need to make sure you have a proper strategy in place. First is if you're still using the old way of doing things where there is a physical network and each of those machines are going to have an IP address inside the network, you really should be scanning all those systems before they're allowed to get inside the network. And second is if you've already adopted the SASE zero trust network access architecture, then you're already enforcing consistent security policies using the SASE architecture, and the zero trust network access basically prevents your crown jewel applications from getting impacted from one of those impacted machines. So if you've done that, then you're already ahead of the game. So make sure you have thought about this and you keep your network safe.
Well, Deepen Desai, CISO of Zscaler, thank you very much for your time. Look forward to more information from you in the future. No doubt you're already working on the 2021 State of Encrypted Attacks report in the background, and your Threat Labs guys are going ballistic, probably with all of the increased activity from this year, which doesn't look like it's going to get any lower next year. So thank you very much, and I hope to talk to you again in the future.
Thank you, Alex. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.